What would you do if the person you were about to marry publicly humiliated the one who raised you, right at the table where you promised forever? If this is your first time on Top Core, welcome. We tell real stories that cut deep and teach harder lessons. Hit subscribe now so you don't miss the raw truth when it breaks. All right, listen close. The house smelled like lavender and cut lemons, the kind of clean that money buys but never seems to completely own. Daniel Whitmore had planned the night the way he planned everything, carefully, with a quiet pride that came from building something from almost nothing. He wanted the two families to meet before the wedding, to stitch the last plain seam between his past and the life he was promising Celeste Montgomery. Marjorie Whitmore arrived in a simple blue dress, the kind she'd worn to church for years. She moved with the gentle dignity of someone who had spent a lifetime caring for other people, not drawing attention to herself. She had raised Daniel on overtime shifts and late-night stories about right and wrong. That history lived in the small way she folded napkins and in the way she smiled politely at strangers. Rosa Grant moved like a shadow in the dining room, her dark uniform crisp, hands steady. She had arranged silverware, refilled water, and smoothed tablecloths until they looked like promises. She'd been hired to help keep the house together, while lives that could afford to fray didn't. Rosa was quiet, but she watched. That's how she paid rent and put food on her brother's table, by watching and knowing what to do before anyone asked. The guests took their places. The violinist softened a melody. Glass chimed against glass. Celeste entered like a line drawn through the room, high-heeled, perfect hair, and a smile that said she expected the world to lean in and admire her. Her parents followed, polished and practiced, the kind of people who'd never had to explain themselves to anyone. Conversation was light at first, the kind of small talk that pretends the important things are not the very things everyone is thinking about. Then Henry Montgomery, Celeste's father, leaned in, and with more pride than he intended to show, began to tell a story about family estates and proper upbringing. He spoke about history like it was inventory, something to pass on intact. Marjorie listened. She smiled. The simple warmth of her words never matched the room, but she offered them anyway, as if she belonged in the same sentence as every person there. When she reached out to admire the china and mentioned an old hospital dining set she used to know, the moment should have been small and kindly. Instead, it became a hinge. Celeste's eyes narrowed, a flash no one would have noticed if they'd been looking at anything but her. "These are imported from France," she said, with a sort of thin amusement. "Not quite the same as hospital plates." A laugh slipped out at the same time, thin, unkind. What could have been answered with an apology became instead a sharpening of voices. Celeste's mother followed with a comment that landed like a hand on someone's face. "Oh, Celeste just means some people can't tell fine china from cafeteria dishes." A hush shifted through the room. Daniel felt it like a physical thing. Rosa felt it in the small tightening behind her ribs. Marjorie's hand trembled on her fork, and not one person rose to close the distance for her. She smiled weakly and said, "You're right, dear. I suppose I can't." And for a heartbeat, an entire life of quiet service was reduced to the sound of that sentence and the chorus of polite laughter that answered it. Rosa could have moved. She could have said something sharp, defended the woman who had fed and clothed her boy when his mother's health failed. She could have turned the world back to the right place, where people knew better than to cut at another person's dignity with a smile. But Rosa had bills. She had siblings who counted on rent arriving on time. She had learned the hard way that the wrong word at the wrong time cost more than pride. So she stood very still, a tray in her hands, and let the moment happen where it needed to. Daniel sat like a man watching someone throw a match near papers. He felt the heat on his own knuckles and the old hurt of listening to people who judged him by where he came from. Daniel's jaw tightened. For years he'd walked between the world that raised him and the world he built with his own hands, and tonight, the seams pulled where they were weakest. When dessert came, a white chocolate mousse Rosa had folded into clouds with evening hours and careful thought, Celeste decided the point needed to be driven through. Celeste turned and, under voices in silver, said, "Rosa, could you check if Marjorie's seat is stable? These old chairs tend to wobble." It sounded kind in a way, a request that could have been polite. Marjorie shook her head and whispered that she was fine. The others sat and watched. Celeste pressed it like a button, louder, so that the comment was not a private one but a blade polished for the room. "Please, Rosa, We wouldn't want her to have an accident. Go on, test it." The room went colder. Rosa leaned forward, doing what she'd been trained to do. Practical, efficient. She touched the chair. She tested the balance. In that moment, as she checked the seam where wood met fabric, she felt the body of the room shift. Expectation and a hunger to see the small put-down completed. Celeste's voice slid like oil. "Actually, maybe Marjorie should stand and let Rosa check it properly. We wouldn't want our elderly guest to fall." Marjorie stood, red blooming over her cheek, and the sound of the chair scraping was louder than anything the violinist played. Daniel saw his mother reduced to a problem to be anticipated and solved by someone she'd paid to keep the house clean. His hand moved before his thought did. He pushed his chair back and it scraped against the marble with an ugly final sound. "Celeste, what did you just say?" Daniel's voice filled the room, quick and hot. The sentence lodged in the air like a thrown stone. Celeste's smile cracked. She tried to wave it off, to call it a joke. "Oh, Daniel, don't overreact. It was a joke." "Mocking my mother and the help? That's your idea of a joke?" he said, louder now. And the way the words landed changed the tone of the night. Guests shifted, forks hovered. Rosa felt something inside her flip, a defensive knot she'd kept held for years. Celeste rolled her eyes the way people roll them when they expect the world to bend to them. "Oh, please. She's a maid, Daniel. They're used to this kind of—" The sentence cut off as Daniel's hand slammed the table, the sound sharper than it should have been, sharper than civility allowed. Silence rushed in like a tide. The violinist stopped playing. The smoke of social comfort thinned. Even Rosa, who had spent a life making messes invisible, felt the room tilt. Someone in the corner, perhaps a younger staffer or a guest who couldn't help themselves, reached for a phone and lifted it. For a second, the small screen caught the light like a tiny sun. Daniel stood with his face like a man who had been deceived by his own dreams. He had asked for a union of two families and instead had been handed proof of an ugly truth. He had to decide, in the span of a breath, what kind of man he wanted to be. And then, the house held its breath with him. The next morning, the whole city was talking, not about the charity gala or the wedding of the year, but about the dinner. Somehow, a clip from that night had leaked online. It was short, shaky, and brutal. You could hear Celeste saying, "She's a maid, Daniel. They're used to this kind of—" before the video cut off with the sound of Daniel's hand slamming the table. 10 seconds long, but that was all the internet needed. Racist bride-to-be humiliates groom's mother. Whitmore engagement dinner ends in disaster. Daniel Whitmore walks out. Within hours, Daniel's phone was flooded with reporters, investors, and friends pretending to check in while fishing for gossip. His company's PR team sent an email marked urgent, begging him to issue a statement before the stock dipped further. But Daniel didn't care about the stock. He cared about the look in his mother's eyes when she left that night, silent, holding her small purse with both hands like she didn't know where to put her pain. He drove to her apartment the next morning, expecting to find her angry. But she wasn't. Marjorie was at the kitchen table, folding laundry like the world hadn't burned down overnight. "You shouldn't have embarrassed yourself, Daniel," she said softly without looking up. "Those people, they showed you who they are. You don't need to prove anything." Daniel leaned against the doorframe, his jaw tight. "I'm not the one embarrassed, Mom. She disrespected you. I can't marry someone like that." Marjorie smiled sadly. "You love her." "I thought I did." There was silence, the kind that fills a room with unsaid things. Marjorie finally looked up. "Love without respect doesn't last. But revenge, Daniel, that never fills the hole it leaves behind." He didn't answer. He just nodded and walked out. But inside, something had already broken. Meanwhile, Rosa was scrubbing the floors of the Montgomery estate when she saw the video playing on someone's phone. Her heart dropped. She froze mid-motion as the room erupted in whispers. "Guess she got caught," one of the caterers said. "That woman's career's done." Rosa's chest tightened. She knew how people like Celeste operated. One mistake, and they'd burn anyone who stood too close. She grabbed her things quietly and slipped out the back door. That night, she got a call she never expected. "Rosa?" Daniel's voice was quiet, tired. "Yes, sir." "I know what you did that night. You kept quiet when you could have defended her. You shouldn't have had to. You don't work for them anymore, do you? No, sir. I left. Good. I want to see you tomorrow. She hesitated. Sir, if this is about the video, it's not. It's about what comes next. The next morning, Daniel met Rosa at a small cafe on the south side of town. No press, no fancy suits. Just two people who had survived humiliation in different ways. I'm starting something, he said, pushing a folder across the table. Inside were blueprints for a new foundation, a non-profit aimed at helping low-income workers fight workplace discrimination and abuse. I can't do it alone, he added. I want you to run it with me. Rosa stared at him like he'd said something in another language. Me? Don't say just, Rosa. You saw what happened. You know what this world does to people like my mother. You know how it feels to be silent when you shouldn't have to be. Her throat tightened. And what about Celeste? Daniel looked out the window, eyes hard. Celeste made her choice. Now I'm making mine. That same afternoon, Celeste was pacing inside her father's office. The headlines were everywhere. Her family's law firm was losing clients. Her engagement ring sat on the desk, glittering like gilt. Her father slammed a newspaper down. You humiliated this family, Celeste. You were supposed to marry into money, not destroy it. I didn't know someone was recording, she snapped back. That's not the point. You showed the world who you really are. Her chest heaved. He humiliated me first. He took her side, the Maid side. Her father leaned in, his voice dropping low. You think this is about pride? This is about power, and you just handed it to him. Celeste's jaw clenched. Then I'll take it back. That night, Daniel sat alone in his apartment staring at his phone. A text came through, from an unknown number. You think you can walk away clean? Watch what happens next. He looked out the window at the skyline, unsure who sent it. Celeste, her father, or someone else. But one thing was clear. This story wasn't over. The first strike came quietly. 2 days after the cafe meeting, Daniel woke to find his company's website hacked. The screen flashed red. Whitmore Co., built on lies. Before noon, 3 of his top investors pulled out. The press swarmed his driveway. Someone had leaked his private emails, edited to make him look corrupt. Rosa called him, panic in her voice. They're saying you stole money from your company's charity fund, that you used it to buy your mother a house. Daniel's heart sank. That's not true. I know, Rosa said, but people believe what they see. He slammed his fist on the table. This is Celeste. It has to be. Rosa hesitated. Or her father. Meanwhile, Celeste sat in a dark SUV parked across from Daniel's office building. She wasn't the same polished woman from the dinner. Her hair was undone, her eyes sleepless, her phone full of unread messages. Are you sure this will work? She asked the man beside her, her father's assistant, Vincent. Vincent nodded. Once we finish this, he'll beg to make a deal. We'll ruin him publicly, and your father will handle the rest. Celeste's lips twitched. Good. Let him feel what humiliation tastes like. But as she spoke, there was something in her voice. Not just anger, but regret. A whisper of the love she'd buried beneath ego. That night, Daniel drove to his mother's house. The lights were off, the door was unlocked. Mom? He called out. No answer. He stepped inside and saw the living room torn apart, papers everywhere, drawers pulled out, photo frames shattered on the floor. And on the table, a note. Stay quiet, Daniel, or she pays for your sins. His hands trembled as he picked it up. He looked toward the open window, the curtains swaying like breath. Someone had been there. And they'd taken something. Or someone. Rosa got the call at midnight. Daniel's voice was shaking. They have my mother. Who? I don't know, but they're sending messages now. Demands, money, silence. Rosa's heart pounded. Daniel, this isn't just a threat. This is a setup. You're being cornered. He exhaled slowly. Then it's time we stop playing defense. He hung up the phone and looked at the dark city skyline. Somewhere out there, his mother was in danger, and the people responsible thought they could break him with fear. But they forgot something important. He'd already lost everything that mattered, except the will to fight back. And this time, he wasn't fighting alone. What would you do if the people you trusted most turned your love into a weapon? Daniel stared at the message again, the letters burning into his mind like scars. Stay quiet, or she pays for your sins. He had read it 100 times, and every time his chest tightened. It wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. Someone wanted him broken. Someone wanted his mother gone. The police were no help. They called it an ongoing investigation. But Daniel knew how those things worked. Too slow, too cautious. Every hour mattered, and he couldn't wait around for red tape. He sat in his dark apartment, phone on the table, when a soft knock echoed through the hallway. He froze. Then a voice. "Daniel, it's me, Rosa." He opened the door, and she stepped in, hair pulled back, eyes full of quiet fire. "I found something," she said, pulling a folded document from her purse. Daniel frowned. "What is it?" "Celeste's father," Rosa said, spreading the papers across the table. "He's been wiring large sums of money into a private account, offshore. I traced one of the transactions through a cleaning contract. Guess whose signature was at the bottom?" Daniel's stomach twisted. "Vincent." She nodded. "He's running something dirty, and I think your mother's disappearance isn't about revenge. It's about leverage." Daniel leaned closer. "Leverage for what?" "To make you sell Whitmore Co. to his firm," Rosa said. "He's collapsing your reputation so you'll sell cheap, but he underestimated one thing." "What's that?" Rosa looked him dead in the eye. "You're not afraid to fight." They drove through the night, following the trail Rosa had pieced together. Empty buildings, fake contracts, ghost employees. Every clue led them closer to something dark, the kind of truth that powerful men buried under money. Around midnight, they pulled into an abandoned warehouse district on the edge of Chicago. Rosa pointed to a flickering security light. "That's one of the addresses tied to Vincent's shell companies." Daniel stepped out of the car, hands shaking, heart pounding. "If she's in there," Rosa touched his arm, "then we get her out, together." They crept through the shadows, their footsteps crunching softly against broken glass. Inside, the air smelled like rust and oil. Somewhere deep within, a door creaked. Rosa motioned for Daniel to stay low. They moved toward the sound, voices, low and tense. "Keep her quiet," one of the men said. "The boss doesn't want noise tonight." Daniel's blood turned cold. He lunged forward before Rosa could stop him, slamming the first man into the wall. The second reached for a gun. Rosa grabbed a nearby wrench and swung. Metal hit bone. The man went down. "Go!" Rosa yelled. "Find her!" Daniel kicked open a heavy steel door and froze. There she was. Marjorie sat tied to a chair, bruised but alive. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Daniel?" He rushed forward, cutting the ropes with a broken shard of glass. "Mom, I've got you. You're safe now." She gripped his hands weakly. "I told you not to fight them." He looked around the dim room, fury building in his chest. "They took everything, Mom. Now they'll see what happens when you take from the wrong people." But before they could move, a gun cocked behind him. "Not so fast," a voice drawled. Vincent stepped out of the shadows, smirking, his suit crisp, his hand steady on the trigger. "Well," he said, "look who came crawling in." The warehouse filled with tension so sharp it felt like time itself had stopped. Vincent circled them slowly. "You could have just walked away, Daniel. We offered you a chance to sell, but you had to make it personal." "You kidnapped my mother," Daniel hissed. Vincent chuckled. "We borrowed her. You made it kidnapping." Daniel clenched his fists. "You'll pay for this." Vincent aimed the gun at Marjorie. "I already have, kid. You think you're the hero, but you're just a headline waiting to happen. One more scandal, and you're done." Rosa stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. "You're wrong. People like you think money hides everything. But not this time." Vincent sneered. "And what are you going to do, Maid?" Rosa didn't answer. She lifted her phone and pressed play. Vincent froze. On her screen was a live video feed, his voice clear as day, saying, "Keep her quiet." Rosa looked him in the eye. "Smile, you're live." The blood drained from his face. "You—" Before he could finish, Daniel lunged, knocking the gun aside. It went off, the sound deafening in the steel room. Rosa screamed. The gun clattered to the ground. Daniel threw a punch. Vincent went down hard. The warehouse door burst open. Flashlights flooded the room. Police officers swarmed in. "Freeze!" Daniel raised his hands, shaking. Rosa did the same. Behind them, Marjorie sobbed in relief. The chaos blurred into sirens and shouting. Officers cuffed Vincent and his men. Rosa stood beside Daniel, her face streaked with tears and sweat. "It's over," she whispered. But Daniel knew better. This wasn't over. Not yet. The next morning, the news exploded again. Business tycoon's mother rescued after alleged corporate kidnapping. Whitmore Air clears his name. Social media was ablaze, half cheering Daniel's courage, half questioning his motives. But he didn't care. His mother was safe. Rosa was alive. That was enough. For now. Marjorie sat in the hospital bed, her hand resting in Daniel's. "You did what you had to, son. But you can't live your life proving you're right. Some people only see what fits their hate." He smiled faintly. "You sound like Rosa." Marjorie laughed softly. "She's a smart woman. Don't let her go." Outside the hospital, Rosa stood by the window, staring at the sunrise. The world finally felt quiet, but her peace didn't last long. Her phone buzzed. A message. No name, no number. Just 3 words. "You're next, Maid." Her hands trembled. She turned to find Daniel walking toward her, concern etched on his face. "Rosa, what's wrong?" She hesitated. "Nothing. Just tired." But deep down, she knew the truth. Someone wasn't done with them. Someone wanted revenge. Later that evening, Daniel held a press conference. Cameras flashed as he stood behind a podium. "I made mistakes," he began. "I trusted people I shouldn't have. But I won't apologize for defending what's right. The woman you saw in that video, my mother, was humiliated for being different. And the woman who helped save her, Rosa, is proof that compassion is stronger than privilege." Applause erupted. But one camera in the back didn't belong to the media. It belonged to Celeste. She stood in the shadows, sunglasses hiding her eyes, watching the man she once loved rebuild without her. There was something like sorrow in her chest, maybe guilt, maybe pride, maybe both. She whispered under her breath, "You finally became the man I said you weren't." Then she turned and walked away. That night, Daniel visited Rosa's small apartment. He brought flowers, not roses, but sunflowers, bright, stubborn, and alive. "You didn't have to," she started. He smiled. "I did. You changed everything." For a long moment, they stood in silence, the kind that feels full, not empty, the kind that says something new is beginning. Then a sound broke the quiet, a knock at the door. Rosa frowned. "Are you expecting anyone?" He shook his head. "No." She opened the door slowly. No one was there. Just a small box on the ground. Inside, a silver bracelet. The same bracelet Celeste had worn the night of the dinner. Attached was a note scrawled in elegant handwriting. "You can't bury power, Daniel. You only delay it." The screen fades to black. The sound of a heartbeat echoes. Slow, heavy, uncertain. The story doesn't end. It waits. Because power, love, and revenge always find a way to come back. What if the people who hurt you weren't done, even after losing everything? Rosa couldn't sleep. The box with the bracelet sat on her kitchen table like a curse she couldn't ignore. Every time she looked at it, memories of that night, the torn dress, the humiliation, the whispered laughter, came flooding back. But now, the laughter was gone. Celeste had disappeared after the arrest of her father, Vincent. The world thought she'd fled overseas. Rosa wasn't so sure. Daniel had been trying to rebuild his life. His company was finally back on its feet. The media had turned him into a symbol of moral courage. Everyone called him the man who stood up for truth. But deep down, Rosa saw something else, a man who hadn't healed. He visited her often, sometimes with food, sometimes just to sit in silence. "You remind me what's real," he told her one night. "You don't treat me like I'm made of money or shame." Rosa smiled. "That's because you're just a man, Daniel. Same as anyone else." He chuckled. "You'd be surprised how few people see it that way." They were growing close. closer than either dared to admit. But the world outside wasn't ready to let them breathe. One morning, Daniel arrived at his office to find a thick envelope waiting on his desk. Inside was a single photo. Rosa, at a bus stop, a red X drawn across her face. His jaw clenched. He knew that kind of threat. "They're trying to scare me," he muttered. He called her immediately. "Rosa, don't go anywhere alone, promise me." Her voice trembled. "What's going on?" "I'll explain later," he said. "Just lock your doors." That evening, Daniel's car screeched into her driveway. The city rain beat against the windshield as he stepped out, soaking wet, clutching the photo. "They sent this." Rosa took it from him, her hands trembling. "Who would—" Before she could finish, the lights in her house flickered. And then, out. Darkness swallowed them whole. Daniel reached for her. "Stay behind me." A shadow moved outside the window, then another. The back door creaked open. Rosa gasped. "Daniel!" A woman's voice cut through the dark, cold, and venomous. "You thought you won." The flashlight beam swept across the room, and there she was, Celeste. Her once perfect hair was tangled, her eyes wild. She looked nothing like the polished fiancée the world had adored. Now, she was a ghost of revenge. "You humiliated my family," she hissed. "You destroyed everything my father built." Daniel's voice was steady but fierce. "Your father kidnapped my mother." Celeste laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "And what did that get you? Pity? Fame? A maid to fix your mess?" Rosa stepped forward, her voice calm but sharp. "I didn't fix his mess. I exposed yours." Celeste raised a small pistol, hands shaking. "You think you're better than me? You're nothing. You'll always be nothing." Daniel moved in front of Rosa, shielding her. "You won't shoot me." Celeste tilted her head. "You're right, but I might shoot her." Time slowed. Rosa's breath caught in her chest. Daniel's heartbeat thundered in his ears. The rain outside pounded harder, like the sky itself was holding its breath. "Celeste, listen," he said quietly. "You're angry, but this isn't the way." She shook her head. "It's the only way." Then, a sound. A faint, steady beep. Rosa's phone. Still recording. Her hand was in her pocket, trembling, but she pressed record the moment Celeste walked in. Daniel saw the red light and understood. He looked Celeste in the eyes and said, loud enough for the phone to hear, "You came here to kill us." Her eyes widened. "What?" A crash. The door burst open. Police flooded the house. "Drop the gun!" Celeste froze, trembling. Then she turned the weapon on herself, but Daniel lunged, grabbing her wrist just in time. The gun hit the floor, clattering across the tiles. Officers tackled her. Rosa fell to her knees, shaking. It was over, but no one felt like they'd won. A week later, Celeste sat behind glass in a county holding cell, her once elegant hands now cuffed, her once perfect life gone. Daniel sat across from her, eyes steady. "Why did you come back?" She smirked faintly. "You took everything. I wanted to take it back." He shook his head. "You never lost everything. You just lost control." Her smirk faded. "You think she's better than me? That maid? She'll never fit into your world." Daniel leaned forward. "She's not trying to. That's what makes her stronger than either of us." Celeste's expression cracked. A tear rolled down her cheek before she quickly wiped it away. "You don't get to pity me." "I don't," he said quietly. "I forgive you. But I'll never forget what you did." He stood to leave, but her voice followed him, trembling now. "She'll never love you, Daniel. She's too good for your world." He didn't look back. "That's exactly why I love her." Outside, Rosa waited by his car. She'd been quiet for days since the break-in, but her eyes said more than words ever could. When he approached, she whispered, "You didn't have to see her." "I did," he said. "I needed to understand why she hated you so much." Rosa sighed. "It's simple. People like her can't stand to see someone they think is beneath them rise above." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time we rise together." For the first time, she smiled again. Not the shy, guarded smile he was used to, but one full of strength and peace. Weeks passed. The scandal faded from headlines. Daniel's company thrived again, this time with new policies, better pay, equal treatment, and a foundation in his mother's name. Rosa started her own program to support domestic workers, women like her who had spent their lives invisible, unheard. Now they had a voice, and she made sure no one would silence it again. One afternoon, Daniel visited her center. Kids played outside, laughter echoing through the courtyard. He watched her helping a young girl fill out a college form. That sight hit him harder than any boardroom victory ever could. She turned and saw him. "You came. I told you I would," he said softly. "You saved my family, Rosa. You changed my life." She looked at him, tears forming. "You changed mine too." For a long moment, they just stood there. Two people who had survived storms meant to break them. The kind of silence that says everything words can't. A gust of wind carried the sound of children laughing in the distance. The future, alive and bright. Daniel took her hand. "So, what now?" She smiled. "Now, we live." That night, a news anchor closed the final segment. In an inspiring turn of events, Daniel Whitmore and Rosa Johnson have launched a joint foundation to protect and empower domestic workers across America. Proof that love, courage, and justice can come from the most unexpected places. The camera faded to black, and the voice of the narrator, steady, warm, emotional, whispered one final line. "Sometimes the people the world looks down on are the very ones chosen to lift it back up." What would you do if the person you loved turned into the very monster you feared the most? That question haunted Daniel as he stared at the empty wine glass Martha had left on the marble counter. The air still smelled like her perfume, sharp, sweet, and full of deceit. His heart was heavy with what he'd overheard earlier that evening. Martha bragging to her friends about how she'd put the old woman in her place. The old woman, she meant, was his mother, Evelyn. Downstairs, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The maid, Grace, was tidying the dining area, her face pale, her movements slow. Daniel watched her from the staircase, and for a moment, he saw something break inside her. A quiet pain, like she'd seen too much and couldn't speak. "Grace," he said softly. She froze. "Sir?" He walked closer. "You were there, weren't you? You saw what happened between Martha and my mother." Grace hesitated. Her lips trembled. "Sir, I don't want any trouble. Mrs. Martha told me." "Martha told you what?" "That if I opened my mouth, I'd be out of here by morning." Daniel clenched his jaw. The pieces were falling into place now. The lies, the manipulation, the sudden changes in his mother's mood. Evelyn had become quieter over the last few weeks, her laughter replaced by silence. "Grace," Daniel said, lowering his voice, "tell me the truth. Did Martha hurt my mother?" Grace's eyes filled with tears. "Sir, she did more than that. She humiliated her. She tore her dignity apart in front of the guests, called her names, told her she was nothing. I couldn't believe it. Your mother just stood there trying not to cry. And when I stepped in to help..." Daniel's voice turned sharp. "What did she do to you?" Grace's voice broke. "She ripped my uniform, right in front of everyone." The words hit Daniel like a knife. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. He'd known Martha had a temper, but this was cruelty. Cold, calculated cruelty. Grace tried to wipe her tears, whispering, "I thought you knew, sir. I thought you saw." Daniel's hands trembled. "No," he said, "but I will." He turned and stormed upstairs. Every step felt heavier. He pushed open Martha's door. The same room that once felt warm now reeked of lies. She was sitting by the mirror, brushing her hair, smiling like nothing had happened. "Daniel, love, you look tense," she said, not even turning around. His voice was low. "Why did you do it?" "Do what?" "Humiliate my mother. Tear Grace's uniform. Treat people like they're beneath you." She turned, her smile fading. "Oh, that. You're really going to lecture me about manners now?" Daniel's chest rose and fell. "Martha, what kind of person are you?" "The kind who doesn't let servants talk back. The kind who won't be walked over by an old woman pretending to be fragile." Daniel took a deep breath, his eyes burning with disgust. You think being rich makes you powerful? No, it just exposes who you truly are. She scoffed, tossing her brush aside. Don't be dramatic. I'm the only woman who's ever loved you enough to tell you the truth. Daniel stepped closer, his voice sharp. You don't know the meaning of love. For a moment, Martha's face hardened, but then she smiled again, cold and confident. Careful, Daniel, don't forget. I know things about your family that could destroy you. He froze. What are you talking about? Her smile deepened. Ask your mother what she's been hiding. Ask her why she really doesn't like me. You might not like the answer. Daniel's heart sank. What are you implying? Oh, she whispered, her voice dripping with venom. Let's just say, the past has a funny way of repeating itself. He stared at her, lost in a mix of anger and confusion. Then he turned and left, slamming the door behind him. Downstairs, Grace was still cleaning the table, pretending not to hear, but her hands were shaking too, because she knew what Martha meant. She knew the secret Evelyn had sworn her to keep. And if Daniel ever found out, everything would collapse. The camera lingers on Grace's trembling hands, her eyes glancing at the old photo on the counter. A photo of Evelyn with a young woman who looked eerily like Martha. Grace didn't sleep that night. Every creak in the hallway made her flinch. The image of that photo haunted her. Evelyn, young and smiling, standing beside a woman who could easily pass for Martha's twin. By morning, Daniel had already left the house. Evelyn sat by the window, quiet and pale, sipping tea that had long gone cold. Grace approached her carefully. Ma'am, she whispered, can I ask you something? Evelyn looked up, her eyes tired. Of course, Grace. The photo on the counter last night, the one with you and the woman who looks like Miss Martha, who is she? For a long moment, Evelyn didn't answer. Then she sighed deeply. That woman was my husband's first daughter. Grace blinked. His first daughter? Evelyn nodded slowly. From another woman, before we were married. She disappeared when she was 16. Her name was Margaret, but we called her... She stopped herself. Grace whispered, Martha? Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Yes. Grace's breath caught. Then, Miss Martha... is my stepdaughter, Evelyn finished, her voice breaking. And Daniel's half-sister. The words hung in the air like a ghost. Grace stumbled back, her mind spinning. She knows? I don't think she does, Evelyn said, but I fear she's beginning to suspect. And if she ever finds out... Her voice trembled. She'll destroy us all. Grace's heart raced. Ma'am, Daniel has a right to know. Evelyn looked up sharply. No. If he finds out, he'll never recover from it. You don't understand. When Margaret was born, my husband's affair almost ruined everything. I raised her like my own until her mother came back and took her away. I thought I'd never see her again. Not like this. Grace bit her lip, struggling to process everything. Ma'am, I think Martha already knows something. She said things last night, things that didn't sound like guesses. Evelyn's hand shook as she placed her cup down. Then it's only a matter of time before she tells him. And when she does, this family will break apart. Outside, the sound of Daniel's car returning filled the driveway. Evelyn's face went pale. She whispered, Grace, please don't tell him yet, promise me. Grace hesitated, torn between loyalty and truth. I promise, ma'am. But when Daniel walked in, his expression was darker than ever. Mom, he said quietly, I need to talk to you, and this time, I want the truth. Evelyn froze. Grace felt her stomach twist, and from upstairs a faint creak echoed. Martha, standing silently at the top of the staircase, listening to every word with a smirk spreading across her face. The battle lines were drawn, and this time, no one would walk away unscarred. How much truth can a heart take before it breaks? That question echoed through Daniel's mind as he stood in front of his mother. The tension in the living room was suffocating. Sunlight tried to slip through the curtains, but even the light seemed afraid to touch the truth about to surface. Mom, Daniel began, his voice shaking slightly. Martha said something last night. Something about our family. About you. Evelyn's hands tightened around her teacup. And what exactly did she say? She told me to ask you what you've been hiding. Silence. The kind that weighs 1,000 pounds. Evelyn's eyes glistened. Son, some truths don't bring peace. They bring storms. Daniel took a step closer. Then let it storm. I'm done living in the dark. Evelyn turned her gaze toward the window. For a long while, she said nothing. Only the sound of her uneven breathing filled the room. Then she whispered, "She's your sister." Daniel froze. What? Martha. She's your half-sister. The world tilted. The air left his lungs. For a second, all he could do was stare. That's not possible, he said, shaking his head. You're telling me the woman I plan to marry is my sister? Tears welled up in Evelyn's eyes. Your father had a child before me. I thought she was gone forever. I never thought she'd come back like this, under a new name, a new face, carrying so much hate. Daniel stumbled back. His voice cracked. How long have you known? Since the day I first met her, Evelyn whispered. I recognized her eyes. I wanted to tell you, but you were already in love with her. I was terrified I'd lose you if I told the truth. Daniel felt rage and heartbreak collide inside him. So you let me love her? You watched me put a ring on her finger and you said nothing? I tried to protect you, she cried. But every time I looked at her, I saw your father's betrayal, and every time she looked at me, I saw revenge. Daniel turned away, gripping the back of a chair to steady himself. His breathing grew shallow. Does she know? He asked, his voice low. I'm not sure, Evelyn said. But she's smart enough to have found out. She's always been like her mother, cunning, patient, dangerous when cornered. Before Daniel could respond, they both heard it. A faint sound from the staircase. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Martha was standing halfway down the stairs, her eyes cold and unreadable. Well, she said softly, her tone dripping with mock sweetness. That was quite the confession. Evelyn's face went pale. You heard? Every word. Martha stepped into the room, her smile tight and dangerous. So it's true. I'm the family secret, the unwanted one, the mistake. Martha, please, she cut her off. Don't you dare act like you care. Her voice trembled, anger breaking through. You think you can hide me away again? Pretend I don't exist? Not this time. Daniel stared at her, tears welling in his eyes. Martha, is it true? You knew? Her gaze softened, just for a moment. I suspected, but hearing it from her. She glanced at Evelyn. Now I know. Martha, Daniel whispered, we can fix this. Fix? She laughed bitterly. You mean erase me again? You're just like her. Pretending you didn't enjoy every second with me, pretending it wasn't real. Daniel's voice broke. It was real. But now it's disgusting, she said coldly. Right? He didn't answer. She smiled through the tears starting to fall. That's what I thought. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out the door. The sound of her heels echoed through the hallway, sharp, final, and heartbreaking. Evelyn sank to her knees. What have I done? Daniel couldn't move, couldn't speak. The walls felt like they were closing in. Outside, the sound of an engine roared to life. Martha's car sped down the driveway, tires screeching, as if she was running from the truth itself. But Grace, standing quietly in the corner, knew Martha wasn't running away. She was preparing for something far worse. The house felt empty without Martha's voice. For the first time in months, there was silence. But it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that warns of thunder. Grace walked through the hallway, picking up broken glass from the floor. Evelyn hadn't moved from her spot near the couch. Daniel had gone upstairs hours ago, and not a sound had come from his room since. Grace looked toward the front door, the one Martha had stormed out of, and whispered to herself, "This isn't over." She was right. Later that evening, Daniel finally came downstairs. His eyes were red, his shirt wrinkled, his face hollow. He looked like someone who'd lost everything in one day. "Grace," he said softly, "you've been here the longest. Tell me the truth. Did you know about Martha and me?" Grace froze. "Sir, Please," he said, his voice breaking. "Don't lie to me." She hesitated, then whispered, "Yes, but not at first. I found out only after I saw that photo. I wanted to tell you, but Mrs. Evelyn begged me not to." Daniel nodded slowly. "Thank you for being honest." He walked to the window, staring out into the night. The rain had started to fall, tapping lightly on the glass. "She's not coming back," Evelyn said weakly from the couch. "You have to accept that." Daniel turned to her, eyes burning. "You don't know Martha like I do. She doesn't run. She plots." Grace shivered at the tone of his voice. "What do you mean, sir?" "She's angry, humiliated, and when Martha feels cornered, she fights back." As if on cue, a loud knock echoed through the door. Everyone froze. Daniel exchanged a look with Grace, then opened the door. And there she was. Martha. Soaked from the rain, makeup streaked down her face, but her expression was sharp and calm. "I'm not here to fight," she said quietly. "I'm here to say goodbye." Evelyn exhaled, relieved. "Martha, please, let's talk." "Talk?" Martha laughed bitterly. "You've done enough talking for one lifetime. I just came to give you something." She pulled out a small brown envelope and tossed it onto the table. Daniel frowned. "What is that?" "Proof," she said, "of what this family really did to mine. You'll want to read it carefully before you choose sides." And with that, she turned and left again. No anger this time, just eerie calm. Grace rushed to the envelope, her hands trembling. Daniel tore it open, and inside were photographs, old ones, documents, letters written decades ago by Evelyn's husband. Each page revealed something darker. A cover-up, money exchanged, a woman's silence bought with lies. By the time Daniel reached the last letter, his hands were shaking. His voice was cold. She wasn't lying. Evelyn looked up, terrified. "Daniel, listen to me." He cut her off. "You knew my father paid her mother to disappear. You knew everything." "I did it to protect you," she cried. "Protect me?" Daniel slammed the letter down. "You destroyed her life and mine." The rain thundered harder outside, lightning flashing through the windows. Grace backed away, whispering, "Oh, Lord, this is about to get ugly." Daniel turned to his mother, tears and fury mixing in his voice. "You said you wanted to keep peace in this family, but all you ever kept was a lie." The storm outside grew louder, and just as Evelyn tried to speak, the front door creaked open again. All three turned, and there stood Martha. Her expression was unreadable. In her hand was something glinting in the dim light. The camera pans to her face, emotionless, soaked, trembling, as thunder booms across the sky. Fade out. The night air was heavy, the kind that holds its breath before everything explodes. Rain slapped against the windows like angry hands, while thunder rolled over the hills. Inside, the mansion felt smaller than ever. Every shadow seemed alive. Every creak in the floor felt like a warning. "Martha," Daniel said cautiously, taking a step forward. "Put that down." The metal glint in her hand caught the lightning. It was a knife, sharp and trembling in her grip. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but her voice was steady. "You destroyed my life before I was even born." Evelyn stood frozen, whispering, "Martha, please, let's talk about this." Martha laughed, a broken sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Talk? You've been talking for years, Evelyn. Talking while people like my mother suffered in silence. While I spent my childhood wondering why my father never came for me." Daniel's voice broke through the tension. "You have every right to be angry, but hurting someone won't fix anything." "Won't it?" she said softly. "Because for the first time, you're all finally listening." The knife lowered slightly, not in surrender, but in thought. Her hand shook as tears fell freely now. "Do you know what it's like?" she said, voice trembling. "To see your face in the mirror and hate it because it reminds you of the people who destroyed your mother's life? To fall in love with a man, only to find out he's your brother?" Daniel winced like he'd been hit. Grace, standing near the kitchen doorway, was silently crying. Martha looked at Daniel with a heartbreaking mix of love and hatred. "I didn't plan any of this. I just wanted to be seen, to be loved without shame." "Martha," Daniel whispered, stepping closer. "You are seen. I see you, not as my sister, not as a mistake, as someone who deserved better from all of us." For a split second, her eyes softened, a small crack in her rage. Then Evelyn spoke. "Daniel, step back. She's unstable." Martha's gaze snapped toward Evelyn. "Unstable? You made me unstable. You lied, you manipulated, and then you made sure your son grew up thinking he was untouchable while my mother died in poverty." Evelyn flinched. "I never wanted your mother to suffer." "But she did," Martha screamed. "Because of you!" She lunged forward, and Grace, acting on instinct, moved. There was a flash, a scream, and then silence. When Daniel opened his eyes, Grace was standing between them, her hand bleeding from where the knife had grazed her palm. "Martha," Grace said, voice low but firm, "this isn't who you are." Tears filled Martha's eyes again. The knife clattered to the floor. She sank to her knees, sobbing into her hands. "I just wanted justice," she whispered. Daniel knelt beside her, his own tears falling. "Then we'll find justice together, but not like this." The storm outside began to fade, replaced by the soft hum of rain. Evelyn sat down slowly, her body trembling. For the first time in years, truth had burned through the lies, but it didn't bring peace. It brought something else. Regret. Grace tore a piece of cloth and wrapped her bleeding hand. Her eyes flicked toward Martha, who now looked small and broken on the marble floor. Evelyn finally spoke, her voice quiet and raw. "I'll turn myself in. The past can't stay buried anymore." But before she could rise, the sound of tires screeched outside. 3 black cars pulled into the driveway. Headlights glared through the rain. Daniel frowned. "Who is that?" Martha looked up, eyes widening. "You shouldn't have called them." Evelyn froze. "Called who?" Martha's expression turned cold again. "The people who paid for silence the first time. They're not going to let you talk now." The front door rattled under a heavy knock. Grace whispered, "Lord have mercy." Daniel grabbed Martha's arm. "Who are they?" Martha looked toward the window, fear filling her face for the first time. "My father's lawyers," she whispered. "And they don't come to talk." Thunder rolled again as the knocking grew louder, sharp, forceful, angry. Daniel moved to the door, fists clenched. Evelyn whispered his name, but it was too late. He opened it. 4 men in black suits stood under the porch light. Their faces were hidden by shadows. The man in front spoke calmly. "Mr. Bennett," he said, "you need to come with us. There's been a development." Daniel didn't move. "What development?" The man smiled faintly. "Your father isn't dead." The words hit Daniel like ice. "What did you just say?" he asked, voice barely a whisper. The man repeated slowly, "Your father, Charles Bennett. He's alive." Evelyn gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Martha stumbled back, whispering, "That's impossible." Grace gripped the edge of the counter, her mind racing. "But his funeral?" "There was no body," the man interrupted. "Only ashes. No proof. And now, Mr. Bennett wants his family back. All of it." Daniel stared at him, speechless. "Where is he?" The man's smile widened. "He'll see you soon, but he requested a private meeting first." Daniel looked at his mother, who stood frozen. "Did you know?" Evelyn shook her head slowly. "No. No, Daniel. He was gone. I buried him myself." The man stepped closer. "We'll give you an hour to prepare. After that, we come back, with or without your cooperation." He turned and walked away, his shoes splashing through puddles as the others followed. The sound of the car engines faded into the night, leaving behind a suffocating silence. Grace was the first to speak. "If your husband's alive, Mrs. Evelyn, then everything changes." Evelyn's eyes filled with dread. "If he's alive, Grace, then everything was for nothing." Martha laughed bitterly. "So the man who ruined 2 families gets to come back and play king again. How convenient." Daniel clenched his jaw. "We're going to find out what's really going on, and if he's behind this mess, he's going to answer for it." The rain had stopped, but the air inside felt heavy with storm energy that hadn't left yet. Evelyn walked to the fireplace and stared into the dying flames. "He was never a good man," she whispered. "He could charm anyone, but inside he was poison. He made promises he never kept, and when his lies caught up to him, he vanished." Grace listened quietly, realizing she was hearing pieces of a story that had been buried for decades. Martha's voice cut through the silence. "So he faked his death?" Evelyn nodded slowly. "Most likely. He knew the scandals would destroy him, so he disappeared and left me to clean up the mess." Daniel rubbed his face in frustration. "And now he's back, just when everything is falling apart." Martha's tone turned sharp. "He's not coming for you, Daniel. He's coming for me." Everyone turned to her. "What do you mean?" Grace asked. "He sent me money all my life," Martha said quietly. "I thought it was a trust fund from my mother's side, but after she died, I found letters, signed by him. He knew who I was. He knew everything." Evelyn's eyes widened. "He kept in contact with you?" "Yes," Martha whispered. "And when I got older, he started writing about revenge, about balancing the scales. He said he'd built an empire but lost his legacy because of you." Daniel's blood ran cold. "He used you." Martha looked down, shame and anger fighting on her face. "He said if I got close to you, I could take back what my mother lost, that I deserved to wear the Bennett name more than anyone." Evelyn's hand covered her mouth as the truth hit. "Oh my God, you didn't just come back for love, you came for revenge," Martha's voice broke. "At first, yes, but then I met you, all of you, and I didn't want to destroy anything. But he kept sending letters, kept pushing." Daniel's voice trembled. "Where are the letters now?" "In my car," she said softly. "All of them." Grace stepped forward. "Then we need to get them before those men come back." Martha nodded and moved toward the door. Daniel followed close behind. As soon as they stepped outside, a gust of wind slammed the door shut behind them. The moonlight bathed the driveway in a pale glow. The car sat at the end of the driveway, the same one Martha had driven away in earlier. She unlocked it, opened the glove compartment, and pulled out a small box. Inside were a stack of old folded letters tied with a red ribbon. Daniel reached for them. "We'll take them to the police." But before he could finish, headlights flared at the end of the road. The black cars had returned. Martha's eyes widened. "They're early." Daniel grabbed her arm. "Get inside." They ran back toward the house, but before they reached the porch, one of the car doors opened. A tall figure stepped out, umbrella in hand, walking calmly through the rain. The porch light flickered as he approached. Then, under the glow, Daniel saw the face he thought he'd never see again. Older, sharper, but unmistakable. Charles Bennett, his father, alive. What if the truth that could destroy a powerful woman's life was already caught on camera, and the person holding it wasn't who anyone expected? The morning after the chaotic dinner, the mansion felt colder, quieter. The air smelled faintly of tension, the kind that lingered after something ugly had happened but no one dared to speak about. Grace moved through the halls carefully, trying to keep her head down. Every corner of that house carried an echo of Martha's cruelty. The slammed glass, the torn dress, the humiliation she had endured while the others just looked away. But that morning, Grace wasn't broken. Not anymore. She had something now, something Martha didn't know existed. In the chaos of the night before, one of the hallway cameras had been recording. Grace hadn't even realized it until she saw the small red light blinking from the antique frame beside the dining room door. At first, she thought it was just another security camera, but when she checked with Daniel, he confirmed something different. The system automatically uploaded footage to the mansion's cloud backup, and there it was, the proof of everything. The recording showed Martha ripping Grace's uniform, the shock on Daniel's mother's face, and the horrified silence of the dinner guests. Every cruel word, every hateful look, it was all there. Grace didn't plan to use it, not yet. But she saved a copy, labeling it quietly. Truth, dinner footage, MP4. Meanwhile, Daniel was losing control. His fiancée, Martha, had been parading around the house as if nothing happened. She laughed with guests, posted perfect photos, online, and even hosted brunch like she hadn't torn someone's dignity apart the night before. His mother, Eleanor, hadn't spoken to him since the incident. She was staying in her guest suite, praying every morning, asking God for strength not to hate the woman her son loved. Daniel was torn apart. He wanted to confront Martha, but something in him still hesitated. Was it fear of the media? Fear of losing status? Or was it because he still didn't fully understand what kind of woman he was engaged to? That evening, Daniel's assistant brought him something unexpected. It was an anonymous email sent from a hidden address. Attached to it was a video file. No message, just the file. When Daniel opened it, his breath caught. He saw Martha standing over Grace, ripping her uniform, calling her names that made his stomach twist. He heard his mother's voice in the background, begging her to stop. He froze. The recording went on for 3 full minutes, capturing every second of cruelty. The camera zoomed slightly, as if someone had intentionally adjusted it. But Grace hadn't. Someone else had been watching. Daniel's chest tightened as realization hit him. Someone inside his house, someone with access, wanted him to see the truth. When Martha came into the room later that night, she found Daniel sitting alone, the glow from his laptop lighting his face. The video was paused at the exact moment she tore Grace's uniform. "Martha," he said quietly, not looking up. "What is this?" Her heart dropped. "What are you talking about?" He turned the screen toward her. Her reflection stared back at her from the laptop, frozen mid-scream. "That's not," she stammered. "Daniel, it's not what it looks like. She was lying, trying to make me look bad." He stood, rage shaking his voice. "I watched the whole thing. You humiliated a woman in front of my mother, in my house." For the first time, Martha looked cornered. "So what? She's just—" Daniel slammed his fist on the table. "Don't say it." She swallowed hard, her eyes narrowing. "You're defending her now? The maid?" "I'm defending decency," he said. "Something you clearly lost a long time ago." The silence that followed was like thunder before a storm. Martha turned sharply and stormed out of the room, but her mind was already racing. Someone had recorded her. Someone had sent that video, and she was going to find out who. But what she didn't know was that she wasn't the only one with secrets anymore. Grace had begun recording her own diary, a digital record of every cruel act, every whispered insult, every lie. Because she knew one day the truth wouldn't just need to be told, it would need to be shown. That night, while Daniel sat staring at his laptop, wondering how everything had fallen apart so quickly, Martha crept into the home office. She was searching for the recording's source, but she found something worse. A printed document on Daniel's desk, his will, and under primary beneficiary, the name had been changed. Not hers, Eleanor's. Her jaw tightened, eyes burning with fury. "Game on," she whispered. But upstairs, Grace sat by her small window, whispering her own words into the night. Words not of revenge, but of justice. "Lord, if I can't fight back with strength, let truth do it for me." The storm was about to break. What would you do if the person who destroyed your life suddenly begged you for help? 3 days passed. The mansion was quieter than usual. Martha's social calendar had gone mysteriously empty, and Daniel's phone buzzed constantly with calls from his lawyer and the press team. Someone had leaked the dinner footage online. No one knew who. But the world was talking. The billionaire's fiancé humiliates Maid at charity dinner. The headline spread across every news outlet. Comments flooded social media. Some people defended Martha, others condemned her. Hashtags trended overnight. Inside the mansion, chaos reigned. Daniel tried to contain it, but the damage was done. Reporters camped outside the gates, drones hovered overhead, and protesters gathered with signs reading, "Justice for Grace." Martha was losing her mind. Her sponsorship deals were collapsing, her modeling contracts pulled. Her reputation was in ashes, and she blamed one person: Grace. That morning, Grace was cleaning the upstairs gallery when Martha appeared, eyes red and swollen. Her voice trembled with forced calm. "You did this," Martha said quietly. Grace froze. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play innocent," Martha hissed. "You leaked that video. You think you're some kind of hero now?" Grace didn't answer. She could feel Martha's fury boiling beneath her fake calm. But before Martha could say more, Daniel walked in. His voice was firm. "Enough, Martha. Leave her alone." She turned on him. You think I'm going to let this go? You ruined me for her. He stepped closer, his tone ice cold. You ruined yourself. Martha's lips quivered. You'll regret this. As she stormed away, Grace leaned against the wall, trembling. She hadn't leaked the footage, but someone clearly wanted her to take the blame. That night, Grace heard a faint tapping at her door. When she opened it, Daniel stood there, looking exhausted. I need to know the truth, he said. Did you send that video out? She looked him straight in the eye. No, sir, but I'm not sorry it's out there. He nodded slowly. Then who did? Grace hesitated. She thought of something she'd seen, a flash drive sticking from the security console before the footage vanished. The butler, Mr. Hayes, had been near it that day, but before she could tell Daniel, they both heard shouting from downstairs. It was Martha. They rushed down, only to find her in the living room, holding a gun. Her face streaked with tears, her voice shaking. You took everything from me, she screamed. My career, my name, my life. Grace froze in terror. Daniel raised his hands. Martha, stop. This isn't the way. But Martha wasn't listening. Her hand trembled on the trigger. Everyone's going to know the truth, she said, but I'll decide how this story ends. Then the gun went off. The screen of Daniel's mother's security monitor flickered, capturing it all. One final moment of chaos that would change everything. What happens when the person who caused all your pain finally faces their own breaking point, and you're forced to decide whether to save them or let fate take its course? The gunshot split the silence like a scream. Daniel's heart stopped. Grace flinched and covered her ears as the sound echoed through the marble halls of the mansion. For a few terrifying seconds, everything froze. No movement, no breath, just the ringing hum of shock. When Daniel finally opened his eyes, Martha was on the floor. The gun lay beside her, smoke curling from its barrel. Her hands were trembling, her eyes wide with confusion. But the blood wasn't hers. Daniel's mother, Eleanor, had stepped between them. She was slumped against the sofa, clutching her shoulder, her face pale but alive. Mama! Daniel yelled, dropping to his knees. Grace rushed forward, pressing a towel to Eleanor's wound. It's okay, Grace whispered. It missed her heart. Martha backed away, shaking, her face twisted in disbelief. I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to. Daniel looked up at her, his voice shaking with rage. Get out. Now. Tears streamed down Martha's face as she stumbled toward the door. But before she could escape, flashing lights filled the front windows. Police sirens. Someone had already called 911. By the time the officers entered, Daniel's mother was being helped into an ambulance, and Martha was handcuffed, sobbing, still in shock. Grace stood quietly near the staircase, her heart pounding. The chaos, the flashing cameras, the whispers. It all felt surreal. When the police left, Daniel sat alone on the steps, staring into nothing. Grace approached slowly, unsure whether to speak. She'll be okay, Grace said softly. He nodded, but didn't look up. I don't even know who I am anymore, he whispered. Everything I thought I loved was poison. Grace didn't say anything. She just stood there beside him, silent, like a quiet strength in the middle of his wreckage. For the next few days, the house became a hospital of emotions. Eleanor recovered in a private clinic, refusing to press charges against Martha. She said forgiveness was her way of closing the wound. But Daniel couldn't forgive. Not yet. He began piecing together what had happened. The leaked footage, the gun, the chaos. It wasn't coincidence. Someone had planned this, and the more he looked, the more the threads led somewhere he didn't expect. When he checked the home's digital security records, one name kept appearing. Mr. Hayes, the butler. His access codes had been used multiple times around the time the video was copied and uploaded. Daniel confronted him one evening in the hallway. Why'd you do it, Hayes? Daniel asked. The older man looked calm, almost peaceful. Because someone had to, he said. You were blind, sir. That woman was destroying your soul and your family. I did what I thought was right. You leaked the video? Daniel asked. Hayes nodded. I didn't do it for her reputation or yours. I did it for your mother. She raised me like family when I had no one. I couldn't watch that girl tear her down. Daniel was speechless. He wanted to be angry, but part of him understood. Meanwhile, Grace sat by Eleanor's bedside at the clinic praying silently. Eleanor reached over and held her hand. "You didn't deserve any of this, my dear," she said weakly. "You showed more grace than any of them." Grace smiled faintly. "You raised your son right, ma'am. He just lost his way for a while." But even as the quiet days passed, something still didn't feel right. Martha was out on bail. The media was wild again. And a mysterious text appeared on Daniel's phone one night. No name, just a message. "You think it's over, but the truth is just beginning." Attached was a photo, Grace and Daniel together in the clinic, smiling faintly. Someone was watching them. Daniel's stomach dropped. Whoever sent that message wasn't finished. That night, a car parked quietly across the street from the clinic. Inside, a woman watched through binoculars. Her hand was bandaged, her eyes filled with vengeance. Martha was back, and she had nothing left to lose. What happens when evil refuses to die quietly? 2 weeks later, Eleanor returned home. The mansion had been cleaned, the broken glass replaced, the blood scrubbed away, but the energy in that house would never be the same. Daniel had changed too. He looked older, colder. Every smile now had weight behind it. Grace continued to work quietly, though Daniel had offered her paid leave. She refused. "I don't run from storms," she said, and Daniel respected that. But late one evening, while Grace was organizing the pantry, she heard footsteps behind her. Slow, deliberate. When she turned, her breath caught. Martha. She looked different. Her hair was messy, her clothes plain, her eyes hollow, but burning. "Miss Martha?" Grace whispered. Martha smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Surprised to see me?" Grace stepped back. "You shouldn't be here." "Oh, I know," Martha said softly. "The court said to stay away, but I came to make things right. Or maybe finish what I started." Grace's pulse quickened. She took a careful step toward the door. "Daniel's upstairs. You don't want to do this." Martha tilted her head. "Daniel doesn't care about me anymore. He cares about you now." Grace froze. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" Martha whispered, stepping closer. "You took everything. My fiancé, my reputation, my life." Grace shook her head. "You destroyed those things yourself." Martha laughed bitterly. "You think you're better than me because you're the victim? Because people pity you? You're just another woman trying to play savior." Before Grace could respond, Martha lunged. They struggled, knocking over glass jars and spilling flour across the counter. Grace tried to defend herself, but Martha was furious, desperate, almost unhinged. Suddenly, Daniel appeared in the doorway. "Martha, stop!" Martha froze, tears streaming down her face. "Why, Daniel? Why her? You loved me." Daniel's voice cracked. "I loved who I thought you were." Martha dropped to her knees, sobbing. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I just wanted to be enough for you." Grace stood still, breathing heavily. For the first time, she saw not a monster, but a broken woman. Daniel approached carefully, taking the gun Martha had hidden in her jacket pocket. "You need help," he said quietly. "Real help." Martha didn't resist as he called the police. When the officers arrived, she looked back at Grace one last time. "You win," she whispered. But Grace shook her head. No one wins when hate drives love away. As the police let her out, Daniel turned to Grace, his voice low. "You saved more than my mother, Grace. You saved me too." She smiled faintly. Then maybe it was all worth it. But as they stood there, a flash from outside caught Grace's eye. A camera. Someone was filming again. This time, not for justice, not for truth. Something darker was beginning to unfold, and the person behind that lens wasn't finished with them yet. How far can truth go before it becomes a weapon? 3 days after Martha's second arrest, the internet exploded again. But this time, the target wasn't her. It was Daniel. A video had surfaced online showing him yelling at Martha during her earlier outburst, edited to look like he had physically threatened her. The clip was heavily doctored, with fake subtitles and distorted audio. Within hours, it had gone viral. "Billionaire abuses his ex-fiancée," the headlines screamed. Protesters appeared outside his company. News anchors dissected every second of the video. Social media demanded his resignation. Investors panicked. Grace watched it all unfold from the maid's quarters, her heart breaking. She knew the truth. Daniel had never laid a hand on Martha. But in the world of online justice, truth didn't matter. Views did. She went to find him in his office. He was sitting in the dark, staring at the footage replaying on his laptop. His face looked hollow. "Daniel," she said softly, "you need to fight back. Tell your side." He shook his head. "If I do, it'll look like damage control. They want blood, not truth." Grace clenched her fists. "You can't let them destroy you." He turned to her, his eyes wet. "I already lost everything. My reputation, my company, and half my friends. What else can they take?" Grace took a step closer. "Your faith in yourself. Don't give them that too." But before Daniel could respond, a knock came at the door. It was Detective Raines, the officer who had handled Martha's arrest. He looked uneasy. "Mr. Hargrove," he said, "you might want to see this." He placed an envelope on the table. Inside was a USB drive. Daniel plugged it into his laptop, and what appeared on the screen made his blood run cold. It was raw surveillance footage, clear, unedited, showing exactly what had happened the night of the shooting. It proved that Daniel had tried to protect his mother, not hurt anyone. "Where did you get this?" Daniel asked. Raines exhaled. "Anonymous drop. Someone mailed it to the station this morning." Grace frowned. "Anonymous?" Raines nodded. "But whoever they are, they just gave you the key to clear your name." Daniel leaned back, his mind racing. "Then I'll use it. I'll show the world the truth." But as he reached for his phone, Grace stopped him. "Wait. Think. Whoever sent this, they knew exactly what they were doing. What if this is just another setup?" Daniel hesitated. Grace was right. Everything about this felt too convenient. That night, Daniel received a text from an unknown number. "The truth can set you free or destroy you. Choose wisely." Attached was another video, this time showing Grace. In it, she was comforting Eleanor in the clinic, saying, "He doesn't need her anymore. He's better off without Martha." Edited, it sounded manipulative, twisted. Daniel's chest tightened. Someone wasn't just targeting him. They were trying to turn him against Grace. He looked at her differently for a moment. Hurt flickered across his eyes. But then he caught himself. "No," he whispered. "I know you." Grace frowned. "Daniel, what's wrong?" He showed her the message. She stared at it, horrified. "This person," she whispered, "they're not after your money. They want your peace." Daniel nodded slowly. "And I think I know who it is." He opened a file on his computer. Surveillance access logs, digital timestamps, phone traces. Every thread led back to one name, Mr. Hayes, the loyal butler who had helped leak the first video. Grace gasped. "But he helped save your mother." Daniel's expression darkened. Or maybe that was his cover. Before Grace could speak, the mansion's lights flickered, then went dark. A faint hum filled the air. Somewhere downstairs, a door creaked open. Daniel grabbed a flashlight. "Stay here," he whispered. Grace shook her head. Not a chance. They moved quietly through the halls, flashlights trembling. The air smelled faintly of smoke. When they reached the living room, they froze. Mr. Hayes was standing by the fireplace, calm, smiling, holding an old camera. "I see you got my messages," he said. Daniel clenched his jaw. "Why?" Hayes sighed. "Because the world loves stories of monsters and victims. You, Daniel, you needed a fall to remember your humanity, and she," he pointed at Grace, "was the perfect symbol of redemption." Grace's voice shook. "You ruined lives for that?" "I didn't ruin them," Hayes said. "I revealed them. I showed people the truth about power, about class, about how quickly society turns on its heroes." Daniel took a step closer. "You manipulated everyone." Hayes smiled faintly. "You call it manipulation. I call it storytelling." Before Daniel could respond, Hayes lifted the camera. "And this is your final act." The camera's red light blinked on. Then came a sound, a loud crash from the doorway. Eleanor stood there, pale but strong, holding a heavy vase. "I told you," she said coldly. "No one hurts my son again. She swung. The vase shattered against Hayes's shoulder. He fell, the camera breaking apart. Grace rushed forward and grabbed Daniel's hand. The moment was chaos, sirens in the distance, smoke rising, the mansion trembling with echoes of the past. When the police arrived, Hayes was conscious but silent. As they led him away, he turned to Daniel and said quietly, "The world may forgive you, Daniel, but the story never will." And as he disappeared into the flashing lights, Daniel realized something terrifying. Hayes wasn't lying. The story wasn't over. Not yet. When everything has been stripped away, love, trust, power, what remains of a man's soul? The following morning, the mansion was quiet again. Reporters camped outside, but Daniel didn't care. He walked through the hallways slowly, feeling the weight of everything that had happened, the lies, the betrayals, the losses. Grace sat by the window, looking out at the gray sunrise. "It's finally over," she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "Not yet. The world still believes I'm the villain." Grace turned to him, her eyes soft but steady. "Then show them who you really are." He looked at her, confused. "How?" She smiled faintly. "Tell your own story before someone else does." That night, Daniel released a video. Not an edited montage or PR statement, but a raw, unfiltered recording. He confessed to everything he'd done wrong, the blind love, the arrogance, the pain he'd caused without meaning to. Then he thanked the one person who'd stood by him through it all. "Grace," he said on camera, "you taught me that kindness isn't weakness. It's the only strength that matters." The internet was stunned. The confession went viral again, but this time people saw the truth. They saw humility, humanity. News outlets reversed their tone. Commentators apologized. Donations poured into the foundation Daniel created in his mother's name to protect domestic workers and promote justice. A month later, the mansion was quieter but filled with life again. Eleanor smiled more. Grace laughed again. And Daniel, he finally looked like himself. One evening, as they stood in the garden watching the sunset, Daniel said quietly, "You could leave, you know, start your own life. You don't owe me anything." Grace looked at him and smiled softly. "Maybe I don't owe you, but I choose to stay." He smiled back, a tear slipping down his cheek. "Then maybe we both found what we were missing." But as the screen of Daniel's phone lit up one last time, an email arrived from an unknown address. Subject line: "You think the story ended happy, but every truth has another side." Attached was a single image: Hayes, sitting in a jail cell, smiling at the camera. Beneath it were 4 words that sent chills down Daniel's spine. Season 2 begins soon. The camera fades to black. How do you forgive a world that tried to destroy you? Months had passed since Mr. Hayes' arrest. Charleston's air felt lighter, though the scars of what happened still lingered. The Whitmore estate had been rebuilt, less as a mansion, more as a sanctuary. The laughter that once echoed faintly through its halls now carried warmth again. Daniel had stepped down from his company, choosing peace over power. The media still whispered about him, but he no longer cared. He'd learned something deeper. Sometimes the loudest redemption comes in silence. Eleanor spent her mornings in the garden, tending to roses. Grace had taken charge of the Whitmore Foundation, funding scholarships, building homes for domestic workers, and teaching women their rights. Every morning, a line of mothers, daughters, and sisters would come through the gates seeking help, and leave with hope. But one October afternoon, as Daniel was preparing to give his first public speech in months, a letter arrived. No return address. Just his name, written in steady, confident script. He opened it slowly. "You think truth set you free, but the story you told isn't the one people needed. H." Daniel froze. Hayes. Even behind bars, his words could slice through peace like glass. Grace noticed his silence. "What is it?" He handed her the letter. She read it, then sighed. "He's just trying to live rent-free in your head. Don't let him." Daniel smiled faintly. "Maybe he's right, though. Maybe I didn't tell the full story." Grace frowned. "You told your truth. That's enough." But later that night, as Daniel stood before the crowd gathered for his speech, Hayes' words echoed in his mind. Cameras flashed. Microphones lined the podium. He took a breath. When I first built my company, I thought success was about control, controlling outcomes, people, and even pain, but I was wrong. He glanced toward the front row, where Grace sat beside Eleanor, both smiling proudly. I learned that no matter how much you build, life will test what you're made of. I watched love turn into cruelty. I watched loyalty turn into betrayal. And I learned that forgiveness, his voice cracked, isn't something you give others. It's something you give yourself. The crowd fell silent. Then Daniel did something no one expected. He announced that the Whitmore estate would be turned into a public retreat for families rebuilding after loss, free of charge. This house saw too much pain, he said softly. It's time it saw healing. The audience rose in applause. Cameras caught every tear that rolled down his cheek. After the event, Grace found him outside beneath the magnolia trees, where the night breeze carried the scent of peace. "You did it," she whispered. Daniel turned to her, eyes glistening. "We did." She smiled, reaching out to adjust his tie. "So what happens now?" He looked up at the stars. "Now, we live." They stood there in silence, hand in hand, as crickets filled the night. But miles away, inside a dimly lit prison cell, Mr. Hayes sat quietly, watching Daniel's speech play on the small TV mounted on the wall. A faint smirk tugged at his lips. The guard passed by, saying, "That's your guy, huh? Seems like he made it." Hayes didn't answer. He just kept watching until Daniel's voice faded, replaced by applause. Then he pulled a small notebook from his pocket. Inside were scribbled lines, timelines, names, and one question circled in red ink. "Who leaked the first video before I did?" He stared at it for a long moment, then whispered, "Looks like there's still one truth left to tell." Back in Charleston, Grace stood on the balcony that night, feeling the cool air brush against her skin. Something in her heart stirred, a restlessness she couldn't name. She walked into Daniel's study, the one where it had all begun, and looked around. On the desk lay a stack of old photos, Daniel's childhood, his mother, even a faded picture of his late father. But one photo caught her eye. It was an old newspaper clipping about a local banker who'd been investigated years ago for financial crimes but never convicted. The name made her shiver. Henry Montgomery, Celeste's father. Below the article was a handwritten note in Marjorie's handwriting. "Justice delayed isn't justice denied. It just takes the right hands to finish the work." Grace's breath caught. She realized something profound. Hayes wasn't the first person to know too much. Marjorie, Daniel's mother, had been quietly collecting truths long before any of this began. It wasn't just luck that brought Grace into their lives. It was destiny shaped by the unseen hand of a woman who had once been humiliated, but never broken. Grace whispered, "You saw it all coming, didn't you?" She smiled faintly, looking toward the garden where Marjorie's roses still bloomed in the moonlight. The camera pans out slowly, the mansion glowing warm against the night sky. Laughter faint in the background, the past finally resting. Then, a single line fades onto the screen. The truth never dies. It just waits for someone brave enough to tell it. True power isn't in wealth or revenge. It's in the courage to choose grace when the world demands hate.